and welcome to today's episode on the Moving from Fear to Trust podcast series. Today I am joined by Winter Jade, who is a teacher and facilitator around sexuality and spirituality, and I am so excited to introduce you to her and her work today because I've been doing this podcast series now for over a year, and like everything, I just feed into who I'm meant to have a conversation with. And I was on Winter's Instagram page and she was posting about death, and I was reading through it and I just had this feeling, a real strong connection to what she was talking about, and I was just like, I have to reach out to her and ask her, will she come on to the podcast to explore this with us, because I feel it's such an important thing, especially in the whole journey of moving from fear to trust and entering the unknown and being in the mystery. I think death is just something that we need to explore. And so thank you so much, Winter, for taking the time. I know we're in different time zones, so my brain now with like, you're this many hours ahead of me. Yeah, thank God there's like these little apps that work out our times. So
Yeah,
we eventually synced up.
we made it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for opening the conversation, and yeah, I'm really just excited to see what wants to be shared.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, so I suppose, I mean, at the moment we're recording, and the whole issue with the pandemic and all these fears that are really rampant in the collective right now, especially around like death and
Yeah.
the potential of people dying. So I'd love to hear your kind of thoughts around just what's happening right now with it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, actually, I think one of my main views on death is that I think that we live in a life-affirming collective where, as a globe, really, and many different cultures and levels of society are afraid of death and avoid death in their day-to-day life, as well as a physical ending to life. And as a result, we kind of build a life around maintaining security and control to avoid death or endings or change. And I kind of see that as the corona is actually a real like obvious example of that, as we're scrambling to avoid people dying. We're isolating, we're creating shutdowns and lockdowns in order to prevent death, really, ultimately, and not actually seeing this virus as potentially something that could have a wisdom of its own and an intelligence that's trying to invite us to look at death. I feel like it's our immediate reaction, and certainly in Australia and New Zealand, there's been like shutdown, lockdown, counting numbers of people dying. There's a real, like, the whole globe has stopped because of this fear. Like, to me, that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
And our focus is on deaths, and when you look at the actual number of deaths in comparison to car accidents or people falling off construction sites, it's very little. Yet there's such it's caused the whole world to stop. So to me, that just is such an indication of how we meet death and our wanting to prevent and at all costs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw an interview recently by this doctor, Zach Bush, his name is.
I saw that.
Yeah. And oh my gosh, so moving. But just how he mentioned about, like, I love how he phrased around death, because he's worked like in hospice and, facilitating people's passing over, and how he said, that we've become sterile to death. And, and then he was kind of that phrase of like how the death is actually a rebirth. That it's like, but we fear the end. We fear change. We cling to the known at all costs, even if it's not pleasant. So
totally.
Yeah. What's been your kind of experience around that?
Yeah, I'd love to speak into that, as in, like, we're clinging to the known, because I feel like collectively we're afraid of the unknown. And I do feel that we used to have religion as a knowing. And I feel like as that's become less, and we've become more free thinkers out of the constraints of religious, oppression. I felt in many ways it has been. There's been a real push away against spirituality and what was under the organized form of religion, which is actually alignment to source. And I feel like because we've lost that thread of connection
Mm-hmm.
to our creators, to life beyond the physical form, all we've relied on is actually what we can see, feel, taste, and touch. So I feel like it's brought us down to this very finite experience. And I think that most of us have, like I know in my own life, I've kind of repelled against religion. I grew up as a
Mm-hmm.
Catholic and went to an all-girls Catholic school, and so there's a big part of me that did not have any connection with what I was being taught. So I kind of threw all of it out. But actually, I really believe that, and what he spoke about in the interview was that we need to be able to have a belief, actually, that
Mm-hmm.
belief in something, and turn to something greater than us, and be aligned to that, and
Yeah.
look up to the stars more. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
we haven't done that. We've looked down into matter and to
Yeah.
form and money and to things that we can hold on to. And so when death comes to us, which actually clears all of that, we don't know who we are. We've got nothing.
Yeah.
And so hence the panic. And my feeling around it is actually like, it's not even about physical death. It's really around how can we let go moment to moment in life now. And so that's
Yeah.
what the podcast you would have heard me talk about is
Yeah.
in, like, how can we meet death every day? And where are the areas that we need to sweep through in our lives and look at the decay, like what's decaying that we can actually let go? What are the
Mm-hmm.
carcasses we're holding on to for dear life, because that form feels safe? And
Yeah.
when's the mystery saying release, let go?
Yeah.
And when we
Yeah.
do let go as a practice, like living death as
Mm.
opposed to living life, then life becomes more like a radiant, because every moment could be the last moment. So you're alive and things are clear and crystalline. So I do think that, inviting death in now while we're alive is a
Yeah.
beautiful way to actually live a deeper and more meaningful life.
I love that. That's so beautiful.
Mm.
And I think,
Mm.
yeah, because I'm the same in terms of like my mom actually went to an all girls Catholic boarding school in Ireland, and you know she basically rebelled completely. She said even during that time she didn't want, she just felt like not right in her stomach around like organized religion. So as a result, when she had me, then she was kind of like had her mind made up that she wasn't going to bring me up in organized religion. So she just exposed me to different forms of spirituality, and we'd go off to Buddhist meetings, and she'd be kind of like, okay, we've had enough there. We'll go off to, we'll do another thing now. We'd never kind of get stuck in one area. It was just like an exploration,
Yeah.
and that's going to carry through to my adulthood. But yeah, what was I going to say in terms of that connection to spirituality? Yeah, because for me, it's like I felt, going through my initiations, I went into like really ill health when I was like late teen, and that was like my initiation into my what started as my healing and then ended up being a spiritual journey. But I feel like, as you said, because we've stepped away from having the construct of religion, it's yeah, it's just it's a kind of place of like we don't necessarily have those people to like usher us through, because I feel like what you're talking about is like people need to have this kind of shamanic perspective and have something else that they're able to hold themselves in, that
Mm.
again isn't like handing over it to like a priest or to a religion in a sense,
Mm.
but actually is like guiding them back to themselves. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's something that
Mhm.
requires us to mature into ourselves, isn't it? Like our own
Yeah.
spiritual maturity.
Totally. And I do feel like that it's so essential that we find our own alignment to our beliefs.
Yeah.
And I think that what religion did was actually try to contain that into only one God and one belief.
Yeah.
And for the soul part of us that actually know that we're actually a limitless eternal being, like we
Yeah.
know we're not just this human, that's almost laughable that there's
Hmm.
this doctrination being put upon us. But so I feel really almost sad that we've kind of thrown all threads of spirituality out because the organized structures of religion have kind of
Yeah.
tainted that.
Yeah.
But the journey is really then still finding what do we believe in? What do I believe in?
Hmm.
What's my feeling of what am I here on the planet for?
Yeah.
Where's my true home? Like what star do I come from? Like whatever it is, I feel like finding that internal alignment to source. And I think that at this time of Corona is a beautiful opportunity to go in. I wrote a piece around this recently, which was, this is the time I've been waiting for, like right now where there's a global pause, to go in and I'd be like, what do I believe?
Hmm.
What, turn in, and what's the light in guiding me? Like what is the whispers guiding me? And yeah, tuning in and up, you know. And I think this is a
Yeah.
beautiful time to take our focus off the physical
Hmm.
into the metaphysical. So I
Yeah.
really feel the power of that, and that supports death, you know, both physical and also the fluctuations of life so much. When we've got something to hold, you know,
Yeah.
when we're in the dark and we're afraid,
Yeah.
there's something we believe in, actually. So that
Yeah.
faith, I feel, is so key for that.
Yeah, it's
Having
massive.
faith.
And
Mm.
that faith is like something that actually I remember getting a card from a really nice nurse in the hospital. My mom was in a medically induced coma for 12 weeks in 2018, and it was just the most fabulous nurse, and she gave me this card, and it was like a faith is you know, it was for things that are not yet seen, but it's like having that hope that they're there, do you know?
Mm.
And she even
Yeah.
said to me, she was like, "This is going to change you so much, like this whole experience." And because she had had a similar experience in her own family, and she was just saying, you know, how her faith actually grew so strong from that. And I feel like that it's just being able to understand that we have these initiations, and as you're
Yes.
saying, this collective initiation right now, if you can actually perceive it in that way, then you can take the invitation as opposed
Yeah.
to just playing into what's playing out on the surface and just getting caught up into the fear. And oh my God, like I met a family member and they were like, this could be happening. This could go on for 5 years, you know, and people are like
Mhm.
really panicked. And I'm kind of like, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And the truth is, actually, like, my belief is that this is just the beginning of a global crisis. So we're just at the very
Mm.
beginning of something that's coming for us,
Yeah.
because as a civilization, we're decaying. Like, we are
Yeah.
decaying. And so
Yeah.
to me, I see this virus as something's coming in and actually kind of clearing out.
Hmm.
And yeah, I really see it as that those who are passing don't want to be here for the next piece, because I think it's going to get more difficult. So
Yeah.
how we meet this and how we meet the fear in ourselves now is key to how we turn towards what's coming as a civilization. I feel like it's really important, and not just to hold our breath and then go back to business as usual. It's like
I
really
know.
sweeping through our lives and looking
Yeah.
at, I mean, this is the time to go in and do an audit on our lives and look at what are the areas where actually we're holding something that needs to be let go. We've
Yeah.
got the job that we don't like, that we're unhappy in, to cut that away, you know, to downsize our life if we need to, you know, to whatever we need to do in order to be in a deeper alignment to why we're on the planet and who we are as a soul. Like, I feel like this is the time where we need to use death actually as an activator.
Yeah. I love that.
Mm, mm,
And that's interesting you said that about the virus coming in, and it's like to clear away what's decaying, because when I'm, you know, training in nutrition, they're looking at how it's not like just about this, you know, the disease is coming from outside of you, and it's like this separate thing. It's actually that there's like two schools of thought. It's like Pasteur thinks that, you know, he created this germ theory that it's like everything's on the outside and you have to basically kill it off, you know, with antibiotics, antivirals, all these kind of things. Whereas the other school of thought is Beauchamp, which is the holistic view of the person, where if the terrain is actually toxic, that viruses actually activate within the being, within the body, to
mhm,
actually create a clearing out process. And obviously,
mhm.
in some cases, the body isn't able to handle that and it goes into further disease or potentially death. But actually,
Yeah.
that the virus isn't against you, that it's actually coming in to clear stuff out, to actually create like a healing crisis in the
Yes.
system.
Totally. It's a purification. And I actually feel like the organism, this virus as a being, is actually really wise, because look what it's done on the planet. Like, we've been able to stop in this short time, like the climate crisis. Do you
Yeah.
know, like they've showed images of, like, you know, cities without pollution, and rivers
Hmm.
that are like, there's no cruise ships coming around like dumping, you know, pollution oil. Like, we've actually stopped, we've actually been able to do something that we're wanting to do. There's been a
Hmm.
longing to actually address a climate change crisis, and it's just happened. Like, everything's just stopped, factories
Yeah.
have stopped, you know. So look what this virus has already done
Yeah.
in getting us to stop and pause. But I feel like if we don't take its medicine, then it's going to, like, I don't see it getting better. And I feel like that's what my fear for this civilization and for humanity is, that we're hoping it just goes back to normal. We've had a little
Hmm.
blip, like a moment, and now we can just
Yeah.
resume. And I feel like that would be the
Yeah.
biggest crisis.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to also speak to, I love the idea of you know, seeing the virus as something that actually is a purification, really.
Yeah.
And I just read yesterday, I was told about this woman who's 100 years old and she survived it. So it's
Yeah.
like the intelligence of that, you know. And what's to say that those who are have passed or are dying, their higher self, their soul hasn't decided that. So
Yeah.
again, it's like we see death as in the hands of humans, and it's not. It's one of the
Yeah.
deepest mysteries. It's like birth and death are two poles of the same initiatory doorway where we have no control over it. Like
Yeah.
we can even manage the weather, trying to control the weather, through like different means, but when it comes to birth and death, we can't.
Yeah.
We can't predict birth. We don't know when a child's going to be born or the type of birth. And the same
Yeah.
with death. We don't know when we're going to die or the type of death or the doorway. So
Yeah.
it's the greatest mysteries, and so we're terrified of that
Yeah.
unknown.
Yeah.
No,
I know,
yeah,
yeah. And that kind of, yeah, it's almost like that terror, because when my mom passed away, it was like that really highlighted for me that I was actually living under terror of everything. It
yeah,
actually kind of brought to the start where I was like, my gosh, you're actually living in fear all the time. And are you actually living?
yes, exactly. Yeah,
Because it's such a
yes,
sobering thing to be, well, to witness anyone passing is obviously if somebody is, especially if it's your loved one and you're seeing that. And it was
yeah,
just like the most profound experience, because when my mom passed away, she was completely sedated. So, she wasn't conscious in any way, shape, or form. They took her off the machine. So it was basically just waiting for her heart and her heart to stop beating. But she
mm,
was breathing and everything. We were all surrounding her. And we were playing music because one of her favorite music was ABBA. It's her happy music. So we had that on like Spotify. And it was just like randomly choosing the songs. And then it was like this song, I Have a Dream by ABBA.
mm,
The minute it came on, her heart rate it was like boom, started going down.
mm,
And she actually left on that song. And it was like
mm,
she was
mm,
unconscious, but how did her body decide to go at that moment?
yeah,
On that song, it was
yeah.
like she was communicating to us.
Mm-hmm.
And then the pastor from the
Really?
hospital came in, and he was like, don't be sad. Martha's just gone to the next dimension.
Mm.
And I was like, literally, I don't think he even said that. I was like,
Yeah.
I think my mom said that in her, it was like it was channeled through
Yeah.
him. And it was
Yeah.
just like, even though it was so sad, it was
Yeah.
like that's magical. It
It
was it
is.
was like this kind of
Yeah.
elevated feeling as well of, oh my gosh. And over again, I was facilitated by so many amazing people that came into my life to show me
Mm.
that it was a passage that she was just going through.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
the longing to hold on to, as you said, the safety, the matter, the physical. Just
Totally.
because we don't have that perspective, if we had that perspective, it would be sad. You still have grief.
Yeah.
But oh my gosh, like once I understood that perspective and really felt it as my truth, I was like,
Yeah.
if I had to experience her death in a way that it was just, that's it, she's gone.
Mm.
You know,
Mm. Yeah.
I would,
Yeah.
yeah, I would just feel it would like crush my soul. Whereas I was able to see beyond just what was happening on a
Mm.
physical level, and
Yeah.
realize that she's gone on in her path, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just, yeah, it's
Yeah.
just the fear of, as you said, the unseen, because we're so locked into the known. And
That's right.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's the thing that is
Mm.
keeping us so much in fear.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love the way you shared it, because I feel like I've been at births and I've been at deaths, and they're
Yeah.
both the same quality of magic. So when a baby is born, like just before the crown, a woman's crowning, and a baby is about to, be birthed, there's this beautiful stillness in the air. It's like grace enters the room, and I feel that's the same with death. It's like there's a moment of grace, and
Hmm.
everyone feels it. And actually, nursing staff and doctors and hospitals have spoken about the quality of energy that it comes into the room. It's like a deep peacefulness arises as grace comes in. And I've worked with in one of my process trainings, we have a day of death. It's pretty beautiful, I get midwives of death coming in. And so we've had women who come in who are death doulas, and they share their experiences with us. And they've shared that they're the moment that often they've felt like beings come into the room and light come into the room, and these pillars that then guide this soul onwards. And it's actually the magic and the quality in the room is profound. And so if we all got to experience that, if we had an experience like you did, where we actually were visible with death, that
Mm.
our parents and grandparents weren't dying in hospitals and nursing homes on their own, that we're actually like being able to bathe their bodies afterwards and have contact with
Mm.
the form, in the process, and we would feel a lot more connected to our divinity, actually. I
Yeah.
really feel that, because in those moments you feel divine, the divine essence, of
Yeah.
life and death. And And yeah, I also want to acknowledge that I think that another really key piece of being able to work with death is actually acknowledging that the grief doesn't come from the soul moving on. So in your mum's case, you know that she's just changed form.
Hmm.
Like she doesn't go anywhere. And I don't know whether your experience when after she passed, feeling her around you.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, there's often they're right there.
Hmm.
Like they can speak to us and we hear them and feel them. But actually the hardest part is actually that the animal body, you know, the
Mm.
human part of an animal that knows that you'll never touch her body again, that's
Hmm.
animated. Like, so it's more the animal to animal grieving that we
Yeah.
then need to go through the process of like letting go of the form. And I think
Yeah.
that's a genuine grief process, that the
Oh
truth
yeah.
is you're
Yeah.
not going to be able to see her body again or touch her body again or hold her again or
Yeah.
feel her. So that is a genuine process that we need to grieve, the loss of the
Yeah.
form.
Yeah.
But the bigger holding is actually knowing that we haven't lost the essence of connection.
Hmm.
And I had a friend die tragically really recently. It's the first friend experience I've had of someone die very young. He was
Mm.
in his 30s and very suddenly in a car accident.
Yeah.
And it was very jarring to my heart. But I felt him around me for a week or two, and it was so profound. Like I felt like everything, all his work in the world. So he was also a teacher.
Yeah.
I was able to access it. It was like
Mm.
his soul's life was just. It was I could just like almost open my crown and just feel his work. So I got a
Yeah.
sense of all the work he's ever produced, and the unique wisdom he carried, and so it was almost like I got this beautiful experience of being in him. You know, like
Yeah.
actually feeling him so deeply, more than I had when we're in the physical realm.
Hmm.
So it was and it was a beautiful spiritual experience for me, actually,
Yeah.
his passing. And I feel like now I can actually use his essence. Like I can, yeah, his teachings and work are in me now. Like
Yeah.
it's like
I
I
love
can
that.
access it in the, you know, the inner records, you know, the
Yeah.
Akashic records of life.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful having those encounters with death.
Yeah.
You know, if we can grieve the animal loss, I
Yeah.
think then
Yeah.
we
That's
can
it. Yeah. It's like because I that's what I felt like, and that's what I've been writing my first book actually with my mom, where actually we started, well, when she passed away, we were actually started before she ever left physically, but it became clear then that she was to, you know, collaborate and kind of guide me through almost like a kind of a spiritual guided journey. You know, she's been kind of
Mhm.
guiding me along and showing me the pieces. And I
Mm.
remember one night having a very, very strong dream where I was running through a house looking for her, desperately trying to find her. And I went into this room and she was in a bath. And I could see she was like submerged under the water, but I couldn't like see her face or anything. Just her hair was like just coming out of the water. And I heard her voice in my head and it was like, you can't connect to me in my form, only my formlessness. And then I woke
Mm.
up and it was like, oh, and it was like
Mm.
a part of me kind of let go a bit more again to like the loss of the form. It was just like,
Yeah.
just let go. It's not,
Yeah.
she's not there anymore. Like, you know,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah,
I totally,
that's a profound um like a wisdom in Aboriginal cultures. So where I'm from in Australia, in Aboriginal a lot of Aboriginal cultures, because they're quite different. There's so many different tribes in Australia, but in many of them, you're not allowed to speak or talk about people who've died, use their or look at images of them or
yeah,
say their name again because you hold them to a form. And so
yeah,
the recognition is that once they've passed over, releasing them from the form means that their soul can actually return to the ocean of
yeah,
source and actually then maybe reincarnate again in a new form, not having to carry that.
yeah,
So that's one way that they actually see the dead, is actually release them from form. And actually in speaking around death, living death now, I
yeah,
feel like if we can start to do that while we're alive, when
yeah.
we reach death or the death of those we love, we can let go of the form more easily.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a practice I'm doing at the moment, a really strong call. I've written some pieces around this, around particularly around my family and my daughter, is
Yeah,
releasing her from the form that I'm so attached to with my daughter, and actually starting to see her more deeply as the formlessness being she is. That's
I love that.
encased in a beautiful, you know, like young woman's body at the moment and is
Yeah,
growing. But my attachment to the identity of who she is to me, I'm starting to work
mm,
the threads loose now, so she can be free to be who she is, not,
that's
you
really
know, not
beautiful.
attached to me and what I need. So I feel like that's
Yeah,
another process people can start to meet death now, by looking at where the forms, they're attached to forms, and yeah, starting to focus on the formlessness in others more deeply.
I love that. And almost in also because that's something that's really helping me right now, is like to not get like locked into the form of what's happening, like to
Hmm.
actually feel into the vastness of what's there.
Yeah.
Because I
Yes.
feel if I cling to, oh, it needs to look a certain way, it needs to be that I've done that
Yes.
previously, and I've struggled and I've made myself very unhappy. So
Yeah.
now I'm kind of taking that wisdom and, not always applying it perfectly, but always realigning with that practice of just like not like detached, that I'm pretending that it's not happening, but just as you said, not to be caught up into it, like
Yeah.
loosening the ties to it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's a beautiful practice to do in those. Yeah, as you're saying, even in the smaller areas of your life, is just to. It doesn't mean we don't have to. We still can't direct love or our,
Mm-hmm.
attention to something, but then we don't grasp at the, as you're saying, the form of it, and we
Yeah,
just let the mystery reveal. And I think that's what I'm doing with my daughter in a way too. Is
yeah,
in like, because I've seen her from this big, and felt her in my body, and I've
yeah,
watched her grow. Her form is so precious to me, and I've got a huge attachment to watching this being grow, that often I've lost touch with what's inside the mystery of her. And so
yeah,
the same with anything, with a project or with a vision, we could still vision and dream something, but let the form keep like revealing itself. But so we're
yeah.
focusing on the spaciousness, so I think that's a beautiful practice actually you can do,
Mm,
and in your life, and start to track where are you attached to form, and can you release that, and your
yeah,
own form. I feel like the aging process is another beautiful initiation of actually releasing like our own form, because we're not human actually.
yeah,
Like we've come into the form of human, but the true essence of us is infinite and
yeah,
formless. So can we let go as the aging process takes us into, our body's changing, our face is changing, our hair falling out, like, can we release our own forms, so at the
hmm,
moment of death we're able to transition, thanking our
yeah,
bodies and our animals, but knowing that we're returning somewhere to the great sea. So
yeah.
I think that's
I
another
love that.
practice. It's a
I love
practice of
that.
aging. It's a beautiful, graceful way to age, actually.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I feel otherwise it's yeah, it's almost like, because I feel like just from all the language that you're using, it's really like bringing in the feminine experience to, like, it's the soul within the experience that we're having. Because
Yeah.
I think when we're just locked into the physical, of course you're going to fear death, of course you're going to fear change. Whereas
Mm.
when you can bring through the soul, it's like that change is actually graceful and it's exciting and it's adventurous to move
Yeah.
beyond just this fixed static idea of who you are and what life is.
Yes, exactly. And I think a key piece of this, and it feels like this is what the work you're doing, is that in order to be able to have faith, we need to know that we're loved.
Hmm.
So we need to know that when I let go of that form, love is still there. So
Yeah,
we need to create a universe that's benign and loving.
yeah,
And I think that's, for me, a way of doing that many years ago was actually stopping, like, watching news, or like I
hmm,
really pulled out of the global media,
yeah,
like the collective consciousness of the globe, because it was such fear,
yeah,
producing. Everything's just fear based, and so pulling away from that, and I've started to recreate a reality of love, and that I'm living in a universe that is loving me deeply,
yeah,
and that so then I can let go of forms because I'm loved. The spaciousness and the mystery between is love. And
mm,
so it requires us to look at our paradigm of how we see life, our
yeah,
experiences. Can we see some of the hardships as still being love? Can we see death as love? Can we
yeah,
see endings and cycles as love? So I do think that there has to be another audit over how we see life itself, you
yeah,
know? And
absolutely,
I
yeah,
do feel like, I think that there's so much fear mongering on the planet, and that, yeah, it feeds a sense of control, and for us to hold on to something because everything is scary, and I don't want to live in that world. And I really
no,
also believe that, like, this is one thing that dropped in recently, is in, like, the greatest gift we have in free will is to choose our perspective. Like, that's the
hmm,
greatest piece of free will I have, is like, what life do I choose to believe? Like, what
yeah,
do I choose? And I think that's a
I love that.
powerful, yeah, it's a powerful choice of free will we have
That's so
to
funny that you said
decide.
that. So funny that you said that, right? Because yesterday morning I was out walking slash running, and I was just thinking at the beginning, the way all the ideas come when you're out moving, um, and just this thought came in, was like, what is the story you're telling yourself?
Yeah.
And I think, as you're saying, that's the power. That's where we have the the
Yes.
ability to completely change our perspective.
Totally. Yes. And I know that I've had that experience through medicine when I've done plant medicines, and I've had all this constant information of like colors and lights and sounds. And like, wow, what do I look at? Which one do I focus on? And it's been a
Yeah.
beautiful, like a doorway into how I can apply that to my life. Is in like, where do I choose to focus? Like, where do I choose to put my energy and my attention? What
Mm-hmm.
do I choose to believe? And where do I want to direct it?
Yeah.
And I feel like, because there's so much constantly coming at us, there's so
I
much
know.
around. So where do
Yeah.
we actually, and that comes down to a core belief of like, what do we choose to believe? What's our deepest faith?
Yeah.
And then how do we actually direct our lives through that
Yeah.
viewing life that way?
I love that.
Mm,
So what would you say to people listening now, and they
mhm.
are just in that, they're in that journey, and they're kind of like, they like what you're saying is resonating,
Mhm.
and what would you say are your final thoughts on moving from fear to trust as we
Yeah.
are in this invitation right now?
So I would say, like during this time particularly, I would really invite people to go in and actually start to do an internal audit of fear, like where, and fear particularly of endings, like control,
Mm-hmm.
death, decay. Like, where are you afraid of something dying? Like, where are you avoiding death in your own personal life? And it could be you have a relationship that's outdated, like is your name is changing. Like, what are the areas
Mm-hmm.
where in your life where it's like, I'm holding on to an old form? So I think I would really encourage that as a practice. It's like, where am I clinging in my
Mm-hmm.
life? And actually cut away the dead wood. So like that, make that as a regular practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think turning towards death in form would, in relation to people you love, in relation to, having a certain amount in the bank account, like remaining in this house that you're so attached to. Like, also looking at where you have strong attachments that
Mm-hmm.
would prevent death sweeping through cleanly and bringing its loving gift. So looking at where your deepest attachments are and actually seeing if you can do some work to untangle that.
Mm.
So I think it's a real audit of the self,
Yeah.
and taking a spotlight and finding the areas of where you're really holding.
Yeah.
Because my belief is that if you don't let go, it comes for you.
Hmm.
Like
Yes.
if you don't,
It
it
does.
comes anyway. So
Yeah.
wherever you're clinging and you have fear, death is going to come for you. Death is a wise, loving intelligence.
Yeah.
And I know this happened to me in my own life. Last year, this is what you would have listened to when I shared this at Instagram, was that I lost my house, my job, my car, like, everything just collapsed in a short period of time because I was holding on to things that were well outdated.
Yeah.
And so I went through a little crisis around it, going, wow, everything was gone. And even to the point where I had one beautiful canvas tent, and it was like, I just paid so much money for it. I could live in that. And I was like, I've got my tent. At least I got my tent. And when I went to take my tent out, it was full of mold and I had to throw that out too. And it was like nothing. It took everything. It took
Yeah.
everything. And actually
Yeah.
now I'm so grateful because my soul was saying, you're meant to be there. I was meant to
Mm-hmm.
be in New Zealand doing other things, but I was holding on to the physical form. And so I
Mm.
really believe whatever in your life you're clinging to is going to get taken unless you offer it willingly, put it on the altar of life. So
Yeah.
I would say that during this time, audit your life and look at where you're clinging and where you're holding on to, and starting to release attachments now to your beloveds.
Yeah.
Like starting to appreciate that the only thing we know for certain is death. Like,
Yeah.
that's the only thing we know in life, that we're going to die. There's nothing else is certain.
Yeah.
So starting to turn towards death now while you're alive.
Mm.
That would be my advice.
I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah,
Mm.
because when you actually stand into it, as you were saying, I'm sure you've understood that in your own journey of like having things stepped away, you realize
Yeah.
that you're actually always going to be okay,
Hmm.
no
Yeah.
matter what happens. And even if you pass,
Yes.
I'm sure you're like, oh, I'm okay. You know, I left my
Yeah.
body, but yeah, I love that because I
Yes.
think the more we avoid the fear, the bigger it becomes, this big, and as you said, it's inevitable that it's going to come through in many, many different
Totally.
forms. So,
Yeah, and also, and a lot of cultures like Tibetan culture and the Book of the Dead talk about this, and the Egyptian Book of the Dead is that how you live your life is how you experience death. So
hmm,
how you deal with the little deaths in your life and change and
yeah,
having death sweep through now is how you'll meet your physical death.
Oh, I
So
love it.
actually meeting the physical death is starting now. It starts now. It's not
Mm.
just that we get there and suddenly it's going to
Yeah.
be smooth sailing. It's
Yeah.
it's meeting it now. Death comes every day. We fall asleep. I mean, are we going to wake up? We don't know.
Yeah.
Death comes for us every day. So how can we meet the shifting nature in our lives now?
Yeah.
You know?
It's
Yeah.
how, yeah, I love that. That's so, so
That's how
beautiful.
we meet our physical ending. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think my mom, she was, she had gone through so many initiations of just like letting go and, divorce and having to move country and all different, so many different things, her health going and all different experiences that she had to just surrender. And she passed on that wisdom to me when I was in my initiation. She was like, you just have to let go to this. You just have to completely surrender to it. And she had really like embodied that as a practice. So as you're
Yeah.
saying that, I was like, I'm sure she was pretty fine with like,
Yes.
okay, this is happening. This is happening. I'm not
Yes.
really, it might have been a little bit upsetting, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna just embrace it and
Yeah.
trust that she's
Yes.
okay, I'm okay, that it's all happening in the exact way that it's meant to happen. And
Yes.
yeah, it's just our egos like
Yeah.
to map out our 5-year plans and our 10-year plans and
Absolutely, totally. And I feel like now's the time to scrap those
Mhm.
really and
Yeah,
listen. Death is coming, so listening to its wisdom.
I love it.
Mm.
Thank you so, so much. It's been a total pleasure. And yeah, I'm so, so grateful for this conversation. So let everybody know where they can find you and your
Yeah,
work. Yeah,
sure. So my website is called thesexwitch.com.au. My Instagram is Winter Jade, and yeah, I'm Facebook. But yeah, they're the main places you can find me. So it's thesexwitch.com.au. Yeah,
beautiful. Thank you so much. It's been a
pleasure.
total
Thank
pleasure. Thank
you.
you.